So people say that being in love can make you do some really crazy things. And I completely agree, because being in love made me go camping. So let me explain. During my freshman year of college, I fell madly in love for the first time. My boyfriend was so sweet. He did things like bring me roses to celebrate our 2-month anniversary. He introduced me to his parents. He took me to parties, and I spent the whole year imagining what our future children would be named. And then at the end of that year, I got dumped hard. I was a complete mess. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to even take a shower. I wasn't interested in hanging out with friends. I couldn't drag myself to class. I couldn't imagine ever feeling that things would be normal. And it was in this sort of zombie-like state, this state where I couldn't even fathom gorging myself on bowls of ice cream, which I'd been told by pretty much every movie I'd ever seen in my life was supposed to make me feel better. It was in this state of depression that my friend Carrie came to me with an invitation. She and some of her friends from her floor were going to go on an overnight camping trip, and she wanted me to join them. A camping trip. I don't know if you can tell by looking at me. This may come as a surprise, I don't know, but I am not a camper. I have memories of my Girl Scout days and a night I spent at Camp 7 Hills that was so miserable that my whole troop unanimously decided that we would never camp again. And all of our future trips would involve staying at hotels, which is true, that did happen. My wardrobe is 99.9% pink. My #1 phobia in life is the spider. I did not have high hopes about this trip. But on the other hand, I was so miserable already. I didn't want to do anything. So I figured, what's the worst that could happen? The day of the trip, I got my things together, headed down to the parking lot to meet the group, and when I arrived, I noticed red flag #1. Aside from me and Carrie and this random guy named Al, every other person going on the trip was part of a couple. Quick public service announcement. If you're ever trying to cheer up somebody who's newly dumped, inviting them on a trip full of blissfully happy, head over heels in love people, probably not a recipe for success. But I was already there. I knew it was too late to back out, so I put my stuff in the trunk of someone's car, and I looked around for the only other thing I thought might make the night bearable. Beer. Red flag #2, there wasn't any. So I asked someone about it, and he said, "Oh yeah, Allison, Carrie told us you had an ID, so we were hoping you could buy us the beer." Red flag #3. So it was true that I had an ID, but it was also true that the thought of actually using it was something absolutely terrifying to me. It was absurdly terrible. It said that I was Canadian. It had a huge red maple leaf in the upper right-hand corner. It listed my height and weight in centimeters. Metric system. I spent the whole drive over to the store feeling like I was about to be sick and picturing myself being led away in handcuffs. But amazingly, the cashier that day was either the kindest or the dumbest man on the planet, because he sold it to me without any sort of question, and we were on our way. We arrived at the campsite a little while later, and everyone started to set up the tents, and by everyone, I obviously do not include me. So I took this brief moment to try to refocus my negative mindset, looking up at the sky and sort of setting a little plea to above to help me get through this night. And that's when I noticed big, giant, flashing red flag #4. The sky was dark, and it was not night. So I asked, did anybody check the weather for tonight? Nobody had. But Carrie leaned over, and in a tone I'm sure she thought was reassuring, she said, "Oh, don't worry, the tent is totally waterproof." Well, sure enough, shortly later, just before we even roasted the first marshmallow, the skies opened up and the rain just violently began to fall. Everyone ran for cover. All the couples ran to their private little love nests for the night, and Al ran over to his large bachelor tent. Carrie and I made a beeline for ours, and we were maybe in there a good 10 minutes before that totally waterproof tent became, you guessed it, totally not. So we had to make a quick calculation. The only other place we could think of to seek refuge for the evening was Al's. Not surprisingly, he was pretty happy to invite the other two single ladies on the trip into his tent. I thought this was a pretty shady situation, but as time went on, I had to concede that Al's tent had some major advantages. Number one, obviously, it was dry. Number two, it was much larger than ours, which was making me feel really claustrophobic as that stooped ceiling was sort of right over my head. And number three, he had the really important foresight to grab a bunch of beer with him just as the rain was starting and bring it into the tent. So over the next few hours, we were talking, we were laughing, we were having some drinks, and I had to admit I was having a decent time. You know, maybe camping got a bad rap. Maybe I was being unfair and closed-minded, and I should have been a little bit more open to new experiences. The other thing that was improving my mood, I think, was that even though, yes, we were camping, this was not a 100% into the wilderness sort of experience. There were public restrooms nearby. So as we inevitably needed to use them over the course of the evening after having a few drinks, we were able to do that without the indignity of trying to squat in the woods in the middle of a torrential downpour. So, you know, over the next couple hours, I used the bathroom a few times. And Carrie used the bathroom a few times. And eventually, Al used the bathroom. The moment that he left, Carrie turned and looked at me intently and said, "I have a question for you. Be honest." "Okay," I said, "what's going on?" "Did you make out with Al when I was in the bathroom?" "What?" "No," is both, I think, what I thought and what I told her. "Why? Did you make out with Al when I was in the bathroom?" Silence. And a slow, guilty smile spread across her face. Okay, so this was happening. I am the awkward third wheel, trapped in a tent with a newly formed love connection amidst a sea of couples in a rainstorm. When Al returned, he must have noticed the palpable awkwardness hanging in the air, and being a smart guy, he made a quick beeline to his car, saying he thought maybe he'd get a better night's sleep there. Carrie waited a respectable 5 minutes before she said she thought she'd join him. Not, of course, because she was interested in Al, but because she was starting to feel like maybe she was getting a cold and maybe she'd get a better night's sleep in the car, not in this tent that was a little bit damp. I couldn't even make eye contact with her as she left. Did I mention that by now Al's tent was also not totally waterproof? Over the next several hours, raindrops literally kept falling on my head. And I gradually realized that my sleeping bag was not just cold, it was actually soaking wet. The water was seeping up through the bottom of the tent. The harder that the rain fell, the more I became convinced that the entire world was sobbing with me. I spent the rest of the night imagining every sad song I could think of playing on blast. All by myself, everybody hurts, nothing compares to you. This sort of glorious, melodramatic crescendo of emotions. And I honestly did not think that I would survive the night. But the next morning, when I woke up, I realized something kind of amazing. I wanted to do all kinds of things. I wanted to take a shower. I was really excited about putting on dry clothes. I couldn't wait to call all of my friends and complain about what a terrible person Carrie was. I I even was looking forward to eating a huge bowl of ice cream. Getting your heart broken is absolutely brutal, but it is nothing compared to camping in the rain.